Welcome back to another episode of the Corner of Story and Game. Today I'm thrilled to be joined by the very talented Jennifer Brozek. Jennifer is a multi-award-winning author, editor, and media tie-in writer whose work spans across various genres and shared universes. From her acclaimed books like Never Let Me Sleep and The Last Days of Salton Academy, to her tie-in novels such as BattleTech, The Nellis Academy Incident, and Shadowrun Auditions, Jennifer has mastered the art of writing across established worlds. Today we'll delve into the unique challenges and creative opportunities presented when writing tie-in fiction. Jennifer, thank you for joining me.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
I am excited to have you on the show. I've been looking for somebody to talk tie-in fiction, writing tie-in stuff, cross-shared universes, all the interesting challenges and opportunities that come in there. And your name came up a couple times, so I'm very happy you said you would sit down and chat with me.
Well, I appreciate it. Tie-in fiction is an interesting profession to walk in as a writer. So
Cool.
Not all writers can be tie-in writers.
Okay, well, we're going to dig into it. But before we do, I like to set a stage, a foundation of your origin story, as it's come to be called. How did you fall in love with writing? What was your journey along the way? Some of the twists and turns, all that kind of fun stuff.
So I am not one of those people who always wanted to be a writer. What I was a reader. In my formative years, I lived in Belgium. No TV, lived off base. The library was basically my main friend. At 9 years old, I read a series called The Dark is Rising by Susan Cooper. And this is a series that opened my eyes to what reading and the magic of reading was. And I became a voracious reader after that. My family, my parents, both readers, let us read whatever we wanted to read. Now, there were some things I probably shouldn't have been reading at 9, 10, and 11 years old, but you know what? I did. And then being military dependent and enlisted with 3 kids, I always knew that I would have to pay my own way to college. So writing was not on there. Through the various years, I went to college at University of Portland, and I actually had my first D&D game. I had my actual first D&D game when I was 14, but that was with my brother and his friends, and I was only interested in the friend. But, but I actually started really playing in the early 90s. Still not looking to be a writer professionally. I was a computer science major. However, what I did start doing was I started writing stories for my characters. First, you start doing the backstory, and then you start doing the stories with the NPCs, and then I became a LARPer. Do you know what LARPing is?
Oh, yes. Of course. Yes.
For the audience, live action role playing. It is improvisational acting in a continuous storyline where the characters often have competing goals.
Mm-hmm.
And by that time, I was back in the Bay Area, and I was writing a ton for my vampire characters. And I knew some people who were writing role-playing games. And at one point, somebody had talked about him hiring one of our friends to write for him, and I said to our mutual friend, "Oh, I'd love to do that." And our mutual friend said, "Oh, well, I suggested you, but he said no, he would never hire you because you're just a dreamer."
Oh.
And I was just like, excuse me? Excuse me?
Yeah.
And the reason he had said that was I wrote for my characters, but I never had written anything professionally. He had no idea if I could work to a schedule, to a word count, anything. But I was incensed. I mean, I was in my young 20s at this time. I was like, don't tell me I can't do anything. I'm just a dreamer mod butt. Actually, what's the language level in this?
Oh, you can say whatever the hell you want.
I swear like a sailor with a trucker's dialect, so...
Have at it, yeah.
Okay. But I was just like, fuck you, and the horse you rode in on. I can do this. At that point, I was reading Blackgate magazine. I contacted Don Bassingwaite and said, I am a gamer. You have game reviews. You only have male game reviewers. You need to hire me because I am a woman and we do game. This is back in the 1990s. And bless his heart, Don was like, sure, you know what? You got Moxie, kid. I'll give you product, 600 words at this time. If I like it, I'll pay you. Keep the product. If I don't like it, we won't use it. Keep the product. So that started me. That was my beginning in professional writing. Then the next half of it was, do you remember Mucks?
Oh yeah. No, I was an M on a mud back in the day, an old Deku mud.
Okay. So I used to play on one called Castle Merrick, along with others, but I was a bard. So my character would tell stories. Little did I know, one of the people that I role-played with was an editor. And he got hired by Margaret Weiss for Sovereign Stone to write the Margaret Weiss stuff. And as soon as he got hired, he immediately turned around and hired me. Because not only had I been doing reviews for Blackgate, I had started doing reviews for Campaign Magazine, and I had suggested fiction for him. In the back, Tales of the Huck Tankard. Terrible stories, but they're great stories. They're terrible, but I was very young in my career. And I wrote on Time of the Twins and Holy Order of Stars. And I got both fan mail and hate mail from those two. Because on Holy Order of Stars, I wrote about why you would worship an evil god. I wrote a little story about it. And people were like, oh my God, for once I finally realized why people would do this. And then on Time of the Twins, I had to write an alternate Time of the Twins timeline. So I had a mage war and I broke up the Solemnic Knights and, I did all these things. And boy, did I learn that people who love a thing, really love a thing, and they don't want any stupid writers writing stupid things about it, even though this is exactly what I had been hired to do. So I had created the Knights of Hume, and it was fun. It was a very good learning experience of the power of the IP writer and the vociferousness of the fan and the reactions.
I'm sure that's that's a heck of an origin story.
The short version is I started out of spite.
I like that version too. That's a good reason. Good for you though. Stick it to the man. But okay, well, you bring up one of the interesting challenges, which is fan service or heated fans or fans who get a little too involved. And we'll touch on all that, but I'm curious, do you still play D&D today? That's one.
Oh, absolutely. I'm actually on a Twitch channel. I play with Arvin Elron. I'm with the Infinity and Beyond crew.
Oh.
Currently, we're going through Oracle of War in Eberron.
Nice.
That's on Twitch. I have a regular game that I play with Sean and McGuire and that crew we call the We Blend game. And so if you're on social media, we talk about us. We blend. Well, we don't blend, but and then we have a once in a while Kingmaker game that I'm in, run by Crystal Fraser. So yeah, I like to play. And for a long time there, my husband was running us through a version of, oh man, something of madness. I can't remember. Dungeon diving.
Cool.
He, down 20 levels, but he was throwing in other stuff in the middle of it.
Nice. Those are fun, like Undermountain kind of stuff. And
Undermountain, that's a.
Is it Undermountain? That's a good one.
I've been playing D&D since like 1979, regularly, off and on. D&D, Shadow, Legend of the Five Rings, Star Wars, Vampire, lots of Vampire, some Werewolf, Mage.
Wow.
The original version of all those. I didn't really get into the second of the Changeling and the Mage and the vampire. I like the original ones, but yeah.
Very cool. Did you play Wraith at all? I'm just curious.
I think I did play one game of Wraith, but I don't know if it gelled with our group. And Call of Cthulhu is a favorite of mine. I write a lot of Mythos stuff.
Right.
Oh, yes. So yes, I game.
Okay. It's good to know. It's important to keep that in mind. A lot of writers draw inspiration and flex their creative muscles from their gaming experiences. So it's nice to have that grounding and understanding.
Yes.
All right, well, let's dig into tie-in fiction. So let's start broad strokes. Let's kind of just set the stage here. What drew you to writing tie-in fiction, and what is kind of your general approach to working in established universes before we start digging into the nitty-gritty?
Well, I never set out to do tie-in fiction, but like I said, I got hired by Sean Everett to write for Margaret Weiss's The Sovereign Stone stuff. And that was my first kind of playing in somebody else's sandbox. And I was spoiled right from the get-go. It set up very unrealistic expectations because they had a beautiful database where all I had to do was type in a name and it would tell me all the things about it.
Okay.
I didn't have to search through 50 different books. After that, he introduced me to Robert Boyle Sprite from FanPro. Were they FanPro at the time? Were they Catalyst? They might have been Catalyst. And introduced me as one of his best writers who loves Shadowrun, and Sprite had a business card out to me, like, immediately. This was back in 2006, I think it was, at my first Gen Con. I had written a book with Ed Greenwood called Castle Morn.
Yeah.
So what drew me to it? Pragmatically, I liked the built-in audience. Because by then I had started writing original stuff, and I found that it was sometimes hard to get people to read it if they weren't already reading. Secondly, I like influencing people's gameplay. I like giving them something fun to do. I was also, before I became a full-time writer, I was a QA engineer, and I worked for Sega of America. I was QA on a bunch of games, including the original Shadowrun game, Echo the Dolphins. That was in the 1992, I think that was. And then I worked for 3DO. I worked on the first 3D graphical mod called Meridian 59. Wow. So my QA career had a lot of storytelling in it, and it led to me doing a lot of freelancing. And once I started doing the proofing and some of the writing on Shadowrun, I did 2072, I wrote primarily what they call the fluff. There's the crunch and the fluff.
Right.
Fluff is the world building, the stories around it, stuff to articulate how the rules work. And I don't write the stats. I can. I just don't like to. Mm-hmm. And I did that for a long time. I worked on a bunch of different games, and then I started editing games. And there came a point where I got to my point in my career where I was starting to write like full source books. Like I wrote an Emmy-winning source book called Shanghai Vampocalypse for Savage Worlds.
Oh, yeah.
And I won the Silver Emmy for that. And I had been working with John Helfers for a while by that time. And he was the person who got me into official tie-in writing. All right, that was a noise I did not do. I have cats, and they're a noise, and that was one of those noises that I'm completely certain was a good noise.
Ooh.
We'll see. Okay, thought process. I sat down with him one day at one of the conventions, and he was talking about editing for Mercedes Lackey, the Valdemar series. Mm-hmm. And I looked at him and I said, I've always wanted to write for Valdemar. If I ever wrote for one of the anthologies, I would write a Bard story. And he said, we never get Bard stories. Sure, I'll ask Misty. Now, by this time, I had worked with him before. I had proven that I was sane, that I could meet deadline and word count and, do all the things professionally.
Yeah.
And I had just won an award for writing. But I was able to write for Valdemar, and that had nothing to do with the game.
Right.
And now Valdemar is going to become a game, I think, or has become a game. There's talks of it becoming a game. At least I've heard back and forth.
Interesting.
In any case, I wrote a story specifically for Mercedes Lackey's Valdemar World. And that was brilliant. That was one of those things that was like, oh, now I know what I want to do. Yes, I like writing my original stuff, but I like playing in someone else's sandbox. Because you have one, you have the audience. Two, you have the constrained set of rules, and they've done all the heavy lifting for you. The world is built. You just have to figure out where your story fits in it.
Mm-hmm. But that comes with a set of constraints as well, does it not? Like, there's walls on that sandbox.
Oh, yeah.
Do you ever feel like those walls are too tight, or do they aid you in your creative process? Like, how do you balance the constraints with having your own voice and sharing your own ideas?
Well, there's two things. I like rails. It is easier for someone to say, Jennifer, will you write me a haunted house story? 5,000 words, I need it in 3 months. Versus, hey, can you write me an urban fantasy story? 5,000 words, due in 3 months. I'm like, about what? What do you want?
Right.
Because ideas are easy. They're a dime a dozen. It's the execution that's hard. So I like rails. So when you're doing an IP story, you want to stay in the theme and the tone of that role play, that intellectual property. So my skill is not in writing comedy. This isn't to say that I don't write funny things, but often the things that are funny, I didn't intend for them to be funny. They just came out funny. This is very much a straight man approach.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas, do you want noir? Do you want grim? Do you want a very military style, with the cultures and courtesies and the language? That I can follow that. But then what I do to keep my own voice is I go and I find the dangling plot threads that don't have anything written about them. So I can run off and tell a story in that direction. Right. I call them micro stories in a macro universe.
Smart.
Most of the time. Sometimes I'm asked to write a big story. Arkham Horror, I wrote a novella called To Fight the Black Wind. I wrote the psychologist Carolyn Fern's origin story.
Oh, yeah. Neat.
And it's one of those things where this was the most technical outline I've ever had to do. They wanted the theme, the primary theme and the two secondary themes. They wanted the outline, the major plot line, and then the two minor plot lines. And then they wanted the outline, and every line of the outline had to either serve the theme or serve the plot lines. And Cassandra Lee was an amazing editor. But one of the things that she and I both agreed upon was Arkham Horror was very male heavy. So I wanted to tell a story that was very female centric. So I did that, and I even played with the whole maiden mother crone thing. But her boss, an editor, said, cut the first chapter, 2 women talking is boring.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, see, this is a thing that you have to understand with IP. To be a tie-in writer is to have someone tell you the creation that you created wasn't right. The character that you create wouldn't act that way.
Yeah.
Now, I did eventually get that first chapter back.
Good.
But we took that chapter out. I summarized it. We did the book endings that her boss wanted, and then we read the whole thing. And she's like, "We're really missing that opening power dynamic." I'm like, "Yep, we totally are. And he basically cut us out by the knees. And she's like, okay, you know what? I'll go back and fight for it. And she got it back. And so I had to do some more edits, but I'm much happier with the story. People have come and told me since they've read that story, that's their favorite character now to play in the board game.
Neat.
Because they read the backstory. So I do like rules. I don't like to have the super tight rules. I do like to have the guidelines, and I do like to find what hasn't been written about. And that's how I keep my voice.
Must be an amazing feeling contributing to the canon of a universe like that, creating a character that's now part of the universe.
It is very interesting. I do enjoy it. I like it. And it's not everybody's cup of tea because you don't own the characters, you don't own the settings.
That's true, yeah.
Like all my Shadowrun novels and BattleTech novels, and even my the Arkham horror stuff, it's my byline, but the copyright is to the company.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
When you come into a new, I don't know if you've had this experience, when you come into a new shared universe, what has the onboarding experience been like for you? Because I've talked to other writers who have, introduced to Forgotten Realms or Pathfinder's Galarian or whatever, and they are given reams of material or homework to do. Or when Jim Zub picked up Conan, he had to go back and read everything ever written. So what has your onboarding been like?
Well, a lot of times I choose projects that I love the IP first.
Right. Smart.
It's not always the same. There are certain, I did stuff for like Masters of Orion. I did a story for them.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd never played the game. So I spent a lot of time reading about the various characters. If it's a board game, I try to play that board game at least once to kind of get the feel of it. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, my husband is a huge board game fanatic, and his friends are all big board gamers. I'm working on a project now that has not yet been announced that involves editing an anthology for fiction for this new game.
Oh.
And now I've never played this game, but I now have the board game, and I've watched. They had a Universe Bible, which is a step up on a lot of other places. Mm-hmm. They had some lore videos, and I have watched a game being played, and I'm like, okay, I can see how this is working. Now I need to do it myself to kind of feel the tone and the how it would play together. Sometimes I don't have that chance. Like when I wrote for Grunts, which is 15 millimeter combat game, I basically got told, I want you to make it all up, and I want it to have the epic feel of Dune. Mm. Like, oh, so you want house conflict, you want to have different backgrounds, you want kind of feudalistic society, or do you want democratic society? And then I just wrote stories based on that and handed it to the owner, and he loved everything. He was like, this is perfect.
Oh, cool.
Now, I have had people go, well, this is pretty good, but, we're missing some nuance. Or I wrote a novella for Ingress. It's a augmented reality game. It's the precursor to Pokemon Go.
Yeah, I play.
I no longer play because I played for a long time. In fact, I was part of Project Isthmus, if you remember that back in the day.
I do.
When they did the big update, everything was purple on black. I literally couldn't physically see the screen anymore.
That's too bad.
So I ended up stopping playing. Now, I don't know how far this. So, do you know about Murder at the NIA or Mania?
No.
So, I wrote a novella with one of their fictional characters, having someone getting into the game. It's the game, but it's inside the world. Oh God, it's been like 7 years. It was a murder. It's a cozy murder mystery with a technological bent. There was somebody who was murdered, and they wanted the story. And I was paid very, very well for it. But it was writing by committee. The whole thing was writing by committee. Like, I send in the outline and they would make changes. Then I would send in the first draft and then they would make changes. And then I would send in the second draft and they would make changes. And then I sent it until it was a murder mystery, and they could not decide who they wanted the murderer to be until the third iteration. Now, the thing is, they're like, can you write it so that everybody's the murderer? I'm like, of course I can do that. I mean, it's hard, but I can do it. The thing is, they never actually published the novella after it got done. I got fully paid. I have the original. At least 2 lore teams have gone by since that happened. And about, maybe it was 2-3 years ago, somebody hunted me down on Instagram and had a picture of the opening dialogue that was Murder at the NIA by Jennifer Brozek, and then it was, they had been censored, blacked out. And they're like, I have your manuscript. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And it took me a little bit for me to get, oh, you mean they're actually starting to put pages of this novella in game? Out of order, censored.
Oh, man.
And I was just like, wait, they were supposed to tell me before they went live with this. And I found out that lore team that actually realized I was a real person, that Jennifer Brozek was a real person.
They thought it was a character in the game.
Yes. This was, I think, around the big crime reset.
Yeah.
So I was like, I ended up asking, I was like, they're like, we're making some edits. I'm like, well, yes, I expect edits. I need a final copy for my agent and my records. I have not ever gotten that final copy, so I don't know what happened. I don't know what they have changed. But I just know that those characters are now in the game.
And you're a character in the game, technically.
Yeah. Oh, I've been a character in game, like
just casually, just dying.
Andy Weir had a comic called Casey and Andy, and Jen Brozek is a character, one of the secondary characters, which made me, when it became a GURPS supplement, I'm at 200-point GURPS characters.
That's very cool. You need to put that on your business card.
It is occasionally one of the things when I'm a guest of honor at a gaming thing. It is, and 200 points GURPS character.
Very cool.
So on my website, I actually have all of the Jen Brozek stories, the Casey and Andy comics linked. So if people are curious, they can just go to my website.
I will throw the links down in the show notes too, if they just want to click straight through to you. So, first of all, I'm gonna be a horrible writer and admit that there are some games that I'll play just for mechanics, and Ingress, unfortunately, is one of those. So I've never actually dug and paid much attention to the lore or the narratives that were happening, which is horrible because I'm a narrative designer. But
basically, capture the flag meets geocaching.
Yeah, and it was neat when it was so original when it first took off, but now we got Pokemon Go and we've got Monster Hunter now, but it was pretty cool. Yeah, it
was cool, and I enjoyed playing the game. I mean, that was a big thing my husband and I would do for like 5 years. We were, like I said, we were part of Project Isthmus with Big Maddie and
yep, that's a big deal.
Angle Jumper.
Oh, that was a while ago. Okay, let's jump back to the topic here. So you talk about that connection between the publisher or the IP holder and then the writer. What are the important things they need to get to you, or that you need as a writer to pull? Like if you were to say these are the 3 most important things, what are the 3 most important things about an IP you need to know as a new writer in that universe?
Well, the first thing is that the publisher understands what they want. That is super, super important. There's a lot of times when they don't actually know what it is that they want. once they do know what they want, they need to be able to give access to the universe information through a universe Bible, an archive of the books and PDF, a database, something so that while the writer is writing, they can quickly look something up to make sure that their facts and their terms are correct. Timelines. I mean, let me tell you, when you write for something like BattleTech, the fans know what each mech should be able to do. So you need to know what each mech should be able to do. And the third thing, expectations, let's just call it expectations, information, and a reasonable timeline. Let's say those three.
That's a good one. Yeah. How important is it that you understand the overall tone, I want to say, or themes that drive underneath the world?
I think it's important that if you're going to tell an IP story, that it feels like an IP story and not, if you're going to tell a Shadowrun story, there's going to be nuances of daily living that you know this is a Shadowrun story. When I was editing a novella recently for a new author, one of the things they did was they never mentioned comlinks or grid guide, and there was a lot of driving in this. So it was like, okay, this is a core part of the world. You need to either explain why they never use grid guide or have it show up a little bit and then turn it off or then break it or whatever. And comlinks, you need to explain why they aren't talking to each other over the comlinks. And fortunately, the author was really good with this and ran with it and had very good reasons for what they did. The other thing is, if you're going to do, like, I could never write a paranoia story because paranoia is humorous conspiracy. And like I said, I don't write humor. I don't do it on purpose. If I'm funny, most of the time it is not intentionally funny. It is situationally funny. You know, I'm the straight man. Do you know who Mrs. Dumont is?
No.
So the Marx Brothers had a recurring character called Mrs. Dumont. She was the straight woman who always delivered that straight line for people to bounce off of. That's me.
Oh, okay.
I do that very, very well.
Thanks. Okay, so you mentioned before fans, and an important part of writing for shared fiction. How do you, and maybe there's no answer to this, but how do you at least try to appease those long-term fans that have ideas while at the same time making it engaging for new readers and making sure you're still having fun?
Well, so for BattleTech and for Shadowrun, when I started writing the novels and novellas, I very specifically was asked to write young adult and for new people. So I wrote those stories, the Nellis Academy Incident and the Rogue Academy trilogy, in such a way that you didn't have to know anything about BattleTech and you could enjoy the story. You would glean a lot off of it. But I also put in very specific details that the real fans would understand the secondary meaning of a particular mech being used or a particular phrase being used. Because even though it's young adult, a lot of all my stuff is read by adults as well as young adults, especially the BattleTech. Because people want to get their kids or their grandkids into the game, but the kids need to be able to see themselves in the fiction so that they can start seeing themselves in the game. And one of the things that I'm aware of is you have to please parents as much as you please the kids. So if the parents are fans, you absolutely have to please them. But overall, you have to write a good story. That's top notch. In the beginning, when tie-ins were new, especially game tie-ins, they sometimes very undeservedly got a really bad rap because they were terrible books. Some of them earned that reputation. A lot of them didn't, but all of them got lumped into this, if it's a novelization or tie-in, it's crap because you have to write very quickly to tight deadlines, etc. Well, yes, you do have truncated timelines, but you still have to write a good story. And with the internet, let me tell you, if you don't write a good story, you hear about it, whether you want to or not. And if somebody doesn't agree with the way you have written something, they will tell you. By and large, BattleTech fans have been some of the best fans I've ever had. They're very effusive. They're very complimentary. They will tell you what they feel. There are a couple who will say things like, that thing doesn't work that way. And if I'm in private with them, I can say, well, the line developer and the fact checker said it did. So on the internet, I don't tell them they're wrong because there's no point. It was like one of my favorite one-star reviews for Nellis Academy was, kids just don't act that way. And my thought was, tell me you've never met a cadet or a military brat in your life without saying those words.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I lived in Belgium in 1980 during the Cold War. At 9 years old, I was doing what happens if we go to war, emergency training, and Dad's on base and we're not. Or we're on base and Dad is TDY.
Yeah.
So military brats grow up faster than civilian kids. And so that's one of those little customs and courtesy things that you can write into a book, especially using young adults, especially if, say, one of your characters in the academy comes from a civilian background. So, you can have a little bit of that rivalry of, oh, well, you grew up spoiled brat. You're just here because somebody, donated money. And then they're like, no, I'm really just this good. And you're an asshole for saying that,
Yeah.
But if you write a good story and you trust the reader to keep up, you can put in the world building moments that they need to know as you tell the story.
Yes.
So one of my best compliments is my world building is effortless. I think that is one of the most brilliant compliments I've ever got. And that's made me happy.
The good compliment. You triggered a little tangent in my head. When you say that you can use fiction to allow new gamers to see themselves in a game,
mm-hmm.
it takes me back to when TSR and later Wizards did D&D books, did their huge line of novels, and then it died off. And Pathfinder had a line of novels for a while, and then it went away, and I think it's coming back. But in your opinion, how important were those books back then, like the Avatar trilogy and the Dritz books and all that?
Well, I think they hit people when they need them. And back in the day, when stuff was accepted that is no longer acceptable, certain language and such, it still touches people, especially young adults, and they can see themselves either as the bullied kid or the hero. It's important, I think, today to show them and put them in your stories. I did not know this, but in Ellis Academy, I put the first canonical gay couple in BattleTech history in canon.
Well,
now, I've been told it had been inferred earlier in other stories, but it was straight on the page.
Good.
But it wasn't my story to tell, it was my story to put them there. So they were just there. It wasn't a big deal. It has never been a big deal. And I've done that with Rogue Academy, and I did that with the Shadowrun. I like to put people who I associate with into my books because they're there. They live in my life. And when I'm aware enough that I know not enough. So for when I wrote the Kilimanjaro run, set in Tanzania, I hired Wally Talabi as my sensitivity reader because I'm a 50-something suburban white woman writing a Tanzanian heist.
Yeah.
I needed somebody who could read and make sure that I wasn't being an unintentional asshole about things.
Right. Yeah.
I don't know if you know the name, but Wally Talabi has one of the best novels of last year out called Shigidi and the Brass Head of a Bufflon. And it's been nominated for the Hugo, the British Fantasy Award, the Locust Award. It won the Nomo Award. Like, his stuff is amazing.
Yeah.
But I met him at a virtual Dragon Con, and I was very pleased to do that. And I've had him write for me since, and his stuff is amazing. But what's important to me is I put people who don't look like me or don't act like me in my books because they exist. Yeah. And then I go and I find somebody to do a sensitivity read, so I didn't really muck it up.
That's such an important step.
It is. And I think it's even more important. Do you remember when they made the human character a black woman in I think it was Dungeons and Dragons, D&D, the race character, the race images?
Back in third? Was that?
No, I thought it was the fifth.
Is it? On the cover. I haven't seen the
not in the cover.
Stuff.
When you go into the book and it was, who all the species and races, you open it up, it's a black woman, and you're just like, that's awesome.
They're good. Yeah.
And it was. I have a number of friends who said that it meant something to them.
I don't imagine.
So I keep that in mind. And as an editor, when I bring in new authors, I look for people like Alina Pete, who is Indigenous. She's an Indigenous Canadian author who is now writing in Shadowrun, dealing with the Indigenous people.
Okay.
And some of her stories are amazing. I'm so excited for her. In fact, I just announced the pre-order link for Shadowrun Magic, Machines, and Mayhem today, and the cover and everything.
Oh, wow.
And it's an anthology, stories from all over the world with a bunch of new authors and old authors. And it's my first official Catalyst Game Labs editor-at-large co-edit for them. I've been editing for them for a while, but now it's official. I'm officially an editor-at-large for Catalyst Game Labs.
That is very cool. Congratulations.
Thank you.
That kind of brings us to a nice kind of bringing it all together capstone, and that is, we've talked about your work as writing for Shared Worlds, but what about as editing? What are the challenges and opportunities editing, working with other, like collaborating with all these different people and then bringing it all together for a shared universe? What kind of responsibility does that give you?
Well, that's the editor, the buck stops with you. So, you have a perceived sense of power, but the editor-author relationship is a dialogue. So that's really important. But in an IP universe, you're slightly stricter about letting certain things through or not. Alina and Marie Bilodeau is another one, and Crystal Fraser, all of them have written in the anthology I just mentioned. For some of them, they had stuff in their stories that I had to send up the line and say, hey, is this okay? How are we going to do this? For example, one of the things that we've never tackled is the fact that Shadowrun is a worldwide story, and language is not just English. There are slang terms and words in other languages that do not translate well to English, so we leave them now in the native language. And now we have introduced footnotes so that while people should be able to understand what the term means in context, we have a footnote. And like the particular word is from the Cree language and it means this.
Mad. Okay.
Or like Maria's Quebecois, and some of her slang was taking French slang or Quebecois slang mixed with Shadowrun slang and turned it into something completely different. So we have a footnote for that.
Very
so
cool.
As an editor, you're responsible for keeping the IP tone and story there, but you need to help the author look that much better. As a writer and an editor, I have to be very careful not to put my authorial voice into their story. So I know there's specific things that I do, like I don't like using the word said as a dialogue attribution. I like to use body language.
Okay.
Most of my stories don't have the word said unless I have multiple characters, and you're just like, okay, this is going to be really a mess if I don't. Because the word said and asked, those words are invisible to the reading eye. The way I write, I want body language. The way someone else writes, they use the word said and asked and such, and I have to allow that to happen. Because that is the way they write. That is their authorial voice. Now, there are times where I will change it because it is just too clunky. But it is an editor-author dialogue. The edits go back to the author. They get to have their 2 cents as to what I say. If they disagree with me, we have a conversation about it. And sometimes they see it my way, and sometimes I see it their way. But all of it has to serve the story and the IP.
It sounds challenging. Was there a transition period? Is that something you still fight with, keeping your voice out of their work?
I've been doing this full time for over 17 years, and I've been an editor full time, editing since 2009. So my muscles are pretty good. I know how to write in the morning, go do something physical, come back and put on my editor's hat. Yeah. But it's because I've had a lot of time to hone that muscle. There are moments where I'm like, this would sound better if you did it this way, and sometimes I will make suggestions, but they're suggestions where I will highlight and say, this sounds clunky, could you try? And I will give them examples. Here's the thing about IP work. I don't have to do that. I could just change it. And I've had my work just changed because I don't own it. Which is why, like with the Ingress, I'm like, if you ever actually publish it, I want the final copy of what you actually published that has my name on it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm cognizant that it's not just me editing, it's somebody else's name on the byline.
That's very kind of you.
I think so. From the beginning, I've had this. My motto is share the love. Publishing and writing is a very small business. Eventually, we're all going to work together. As we used to say in QA, because QA is a small business, mm-hmm. The toes you step on today may belong to the ass you kiss tomorrow.
It's a good saying.
So don't step on anybody's toes. Be nice, be kind. It's not a zero-sum game. Your job is to help. As a writer, your job is to bring the universe to life in a way that makes the fans excited. As an editor, it's my job to make the author look just that much better. And so it's. I mean, I'm bringing in new stuff to the IP. We've announced that we're doing an in-universe magazine for Shadowrun now, and I am editing that whole thing. Well, and it's like the Cosmo of the Sixth World. I have an art director that I was like, I don't know enough about art. Oh, look, we now have an art director who's going to deal with the 24 different images we have to have in every issue. Yeah. And I just let her deal with that because I don't want to deal with that. I have enough in my plate. So
I actually worked in magazine publishing for a long time, so yeah, I know all about
an easing the Edge of Propinquity for 6 years. And had 4 universe stories and then a guest story every month. And this is where, like, I published Shauna McGuire before she was big, Sherry Priest before she was big, Premium Muhammad. And it's just like,
Wow.
I did that work, and I know what it takes to put together a magazine, and I'm aware that I definitely need help. So I've pushed people out. Like, I've got Kat Hardy doing, she's doing all the art and the advertisements, because the whole magazine, the entire thing is in character.
Are you doing the ads too? That's neat.
We're doing the ads. We're doing the pretty black and white pictures, the magazine ads that aren't ads, but really they are.
Advertorials, yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of like Channing Tatum is now the face of Versace.
Mm-hmm.
I just learned that like yesterday. And they showed a picture of him standing in front of a marble wall wearing this great black suit. And down at the very bottom corner, there's this small image of the Versace perfume bottle.
Mm-hmm.
And that's it. That's the only thing that shows that this is actually an ad.
Yep.
But what you're seeing is this beautiful black and white image of this very handsome man. And oh, look, in color is this Versace scent. I don't know what it's called, but because I'm like, let me start stealing ideas.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to have the quarter-page ads, half-page ads, full-page ads, and this 2-page editorial spread. We're doing VIP interviews. We've got celebrity sightings.
Sounds fun.
It's going to be fun. But it's a lot of work. I mean, it's a full-on physical magazine that's going to come out 4 times a year.
Mm-hmm.
We have an open call for those of you who want to write for Shadowrun. Yes. I'll give you the links to the submission guidelines. But basically, do you remember the Playboy confessionals?
Am I allowed to say yes? I think maybe.
The concept. The confessionals.
I know what you're talking about, yes.
Well, these stories are Shadowrunner confessionals.
Oh.
And all the stories are 2,000 to 3,000 words. And the person is telling a story where they break a law. Now, the law can be corporate, legal, familial, magical, the unspoken Shadowrunner creed. But the story is about breaking this law, and why are they sorry about it? Are they saying goodbye? Are they gloating? So every story is going to be doing that.
Very cool. When does that? What is like the deadline?
There's no deadline. It's an ongoing open call
All the time.
Right now. I've got some submissions in. It's a very niche thing. It's very hard for people to understand. I think once the first issue goes out, people will be,
that's what it is.
But I have a story already in, because the first issue I'm cherry picking with authors who I'm pretty sure know what I want,
mm-hmm.
and they write for Shadowrun or they write for other things, and the stories, they're so good. It's so good.
Very
a Shadowrunner who's been infected by something, but they don't know if they should tell anybody because they feel like they're being chromed from the inside out, and it feels so good.
Wow. I'm going to check this out. That's very cool.
Yeah, no, it's an open call. You just have to make me happy. And you have to write to the spec, and your story has to be a confessional where you're breaking some sort of law, legal or otherwise.
Very cool.
See, I want to publish you, but I just want you to get me what I need you to get me.
That's always the covenant. Always.
It is. Editors want to publish you. I don't know why that's such a secret, but we want to publish you. Well, we want you to give us exactly what we need. And we want a story that we're going to think about days later after we have read 50 other stories and written a whole bunch of stuff and had 10,000 interviews and they're still thinking about that one story.
Have you seen a lot of those?
Not yet. Not yet.
They're coming. All right. I think that's a good place for us to put a pin in the whole shared IP stuff. That's fantastic. There's stuff I want to pick your brain on, but I'm going to have you come back and talk about some of the other stuff that came up in that. But before we start heading for the door, though, I do have a philosophical question that I like to ask everybody who comes on the show. And it's a little out there, so bear with me. So I have this theory that there is a magical space at the intersection of obviously the corner of story and game, but also improv acting and music and theater and all these things where everybody can just hang out. There's a shared language, there's a fellowship. It's just a natural space. If you agree with me, and not everybody does, but if you do agree with me, in your opinion, what is the magical thread that holds that space together?
I think that is the ability to tell a story that allows you, or to have conversation, communication, in which you can relate to one another, no matter where you are from or what you are doing. That we all have struggles, and on the face of it, they may look very different, but they're all the same. How are we going to survive? Where are we going to get food, a mate, shelter, fun? And I think that core is, can we communicate and establish a rapport in which we can understand each other?
That's a really good answer. I like that one.
I'm glad, because I'm not sure what else I would say if you didn't.
Well, that means it's the right answer. All right, well, we're going to start heading for the door. First, I'd like to do a little quick fire just to get to know you a little better. What are you reading right now?
I am reading right now. Let's see. I'm reading I've just started the short story collection by Stephen King, To Like It Darker. I am on my...
Oh, kitty.
I don't know if you can hear my cat, but I am reading on my Kindle Convergence Problems by Wole Talave, a short story collection, which is amazing. I'm actually rereading one of my own Shadowrun books, because I'm just starting the third in the unofficial Colors Quartet. There's Makeda Red and Elfin Black, and I'm starting to write Emery Gray. So I need to remember what I wrote. They're semi-direct sequels, but they're all standalone. But I have written things about certain characters in each of those books, and I'm rereading Elfin Black. What else do I have out there right now? No, I think I'm down to 3 right now.
Okay, that's pretty good. What are you playing these days?
Well, I'm playing Eberron, actually, and I'm playing D&D with the We Blend group. Kingmaker is on hold. I don't play video games or MMOs because they scratch the writing itch.
Ooh, interesting. See, that's the conversation I'll have to have you come back on, is to talk about craft stuff, because you've mentioned some of the other physicality stuff that's always interesting, about how you have to have a physical break from a space before you change tasks and all that. I love talking about that stuff, but that's a whole other episode. So sorry, carry on.
Crafting. Yeah. So the last thing I watched my husband play, I believe, was... We're going back and forth between Final Fantasy Rebirth and Tears of the Kingdom.
Yeah.
And he's doing a lot of streaming right now for 7 Days to Die. And while I write a really good zombie story that have been, nominated for Bram Stoker, I don't like zombies. But he's streaming, and it has a Twitch component, which you can help people. So I will watch him do that and help him.
Neat.
So, yes, that's mostly what I'm playing is Eberron and D&D.
Okay. All right, last quick fire.
A lot of puzzles. A lot of puzzles. Ravensburger, 500 piece. Though right now I've got a Springbok that's 1,000. That's a bit busy, but it's Nancy Drew based, so it's got all the Nancy Drew stuff, so I had to do it. But but Ravensburger 500 is my favorite.
Do you have like a space in the house where the puzzle just stays and you don't touch it and nobody's allowed to move it?
It's actually sits on our gaming table, and because my cats don't play with the pieces, I don't know why. I'm very lucky.
You are.
Most puzzles I finish in 2 to 3 days. This current one I'm kind of doing battle with, and so I've asked my husband to help me with because it's Springbok has strange pieces. The shapes are not regular.
Okay, neat. All right, last quickfire. This one's a little more deep. If your essence was perfectly boiled down and injected into a game, and that could be digital game, could be tabletop game, whatever it is, what game, what world, and what would your race and class be? If it was you, if it was as Jennifer translated into a game, what would that race, class, world be?
Well, as much as I'd like to say D&D, I'm very fond of modern conveniences. So I'm going to put D&D out. Honestly, it really would be a Shadowrun, or it would be Star Wars. Most likely, if it was Shadowrun, I would be some sort of entertainer or storyteller based on the Matrix, maybe even with the Matrix channel. Probably corporate. I would probably be corporate. I would be a wage slave, but if you're talking me, I mean, I do work for the man. If it was Star Wars, I would probably be on one of the independent planets as not a high-tier noble, and be a mid-level noble, with just enough money so that I could I could still be a bard-like character. I was, in all worlds, I would be an entertainer or a bard character.
Nice.
Yeah, because that's basically where I am. I mean, that's me.
There you go.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that kind of wraps it up. I do like to open up a little space for anything that you want to promote. You've mentioned a couple things, but hey, let's all put it all together in one place, and then I'll put the links in below. But what do you have coming out that you can mention, or what have you done in the past that you want people to look at?
So first, there is a Kickstarter out. Zombies Need Brains presents 3 science fiction and fantasy themed anthologies. It's for their year 12. I'm actually in their pirate anthology. I'm doing a mythos story where mistakes are made and blood is spilled on the high seas. That could use some love. Check out the pre-order link for Shadowrun Magic, Machines, and Mayhem. My most recent book that came out was Shadowrun: The Mosaic Run, and it's prequel. It's standalone. Auditions did just win the Scribe Award, so I think that's all I've got. Also, I have a brand new website that actually works. I'm very excited about this. 22 years of hand coding raw HTML. I finally hired a terrifyingly competent and efficient web developer. So I have a brand new website. It has a newsletter on it. Sign up, you get free fiction. If you want to talk to me, you can contact me through my contact form because it actually works. I'm very excited. Everything works. So yes, check that out. Okay. And I'm social media. I'm most active on Blue Sky and on Facebook. And if you want to see my cats, Instagram.
Everybody wants to see your cats, let's be honest.
Yeah, I'm very surprised that Lilu didn't show up. We've got Mina here, but she's being sleepy.
Right on. Well then, I think that just about wraps it up. So I'm going to push you out into the cold, but as you head out the door, any parting words of wisdom for us?
Share the love, because the life is not a zero-sum game. And the thing about a rising tide lifts all boats is true, especially in the gaming industry and the publishing industry.
Well, it looks like a rogue AI has hacked into the tavern systems and reprogrammed the jukebox to play Synthwave on repeat. Since we're all about keeping the story safe and sound here, I'm going to have to close up for the night. But before we go, once again, thank you to Jennifer Brozek for sharing your insights and wisdoms into the fascinating world of writing tie-in fiction. And as always, to you, dear listener, thank you for taking your seat at the table. Until we meet again, keep creating, sharing, and exploring those worlds and stories. Stay safe, Wanderer. Your chair will be ready by the fire the next time you stop in at the Corner of Story and Game.